Yeah, but how can I?
Voice in German.
So welcome everybody to the Martley Siegel Theater Center here at the Creative Center CUNY, and thank you for coming out to an evening that we think is as close as it gets to the mission of our center, to bridging academia and professional theater, international and in a way national theater. Tonight we are looking at the history of a school in Germany that actually has changed the landscape of a country, and it's a country that has a very long, rich, and powerful theater tradition. And perhaps Germany at the moment is not as strong in the film and movie business and sculpture or other arts, but the theater at the moment is perhaps on the forefront, or at least on the leading forces. It's quite a terrific landscape, especially also at the moment. With the help of the Goethe Institute New York, we were also able to present this evening and have tonight with us Hans-Werner Kosinger, who's a student from the Gießen School, is here. But most importantly of all, we have the founder of the Gießen School, Andrzej Wirth, here. And some of you who were here in the afternoon and saw the film had a little idea of the landscape of his mind and his ideas, his personal history that really is almost a history of Europe, and also a history of theater that goes back to Brecht's for an ensemble, and Grotowski, Cantor, Robert Wilson, and now to his own creation, the Frankenstein, as some people call it the Gießen School. Some people call it one of the most unfortunate events in German theater history. It has destroyed what used to be real and good German theater. We, of course, think we injected it with life and energy. I also went to this school. And so you're going to have tonight quite an insight into the early years of the school, the work of one of the artists that came out, and then we will talk about Andrzej's ideas, or listen to it. And at the very beginning, we have John Jesseron, this a great New York and American artist, a theater artist, a multimedia artist, and who you all know from his work here in New York. And John was one of the early teachers in Gießen, when it wasn't famous yet. And his work has influenced very, very strongly that school, and also then within the German theater landscape, and has been truly one of the most influential voices in names that include Robert Wilson, Heimer Müller, George Tabori, Emily Thomas, Molly Davis, many, many people who came and taught as artists. But he came back, I think, 3 times, and I hope you got also something back from the school. Then, of course, we have Andrzej Wirth here, Hans-Werner Kosinger, the director whose work is now documentary political theater, we will come to it. And with us tonight also is Bonnie Maranka, who once was a student of Andrzej's here in New York, founder of PAJ, Performing Arts Journal, Journal of Performance and Art, and she will then talk with Andrzej in the last part of the evening about his views, his ideas on theater, and then we will open it up to the public with some questions and have a short, or not a short, but a nice little reception afterwards. So again, thank you all for coming. It shouldn't be longer than 90 minutes. The reception will be in here. If you have a moment, just take out your cell phones and make sure it is off, especially on the panel. The power has to be completely off in case you have a cell phone with you. And here, and I think we're gonna start the very first part. And I will have to put on my mic here. And
stop a man.
We just put it up. So first of all, again, welcome John, Andrzej, and Hans-Werner. And Andrzej, the Gießen School, some people use the word legendary now. How did it start?
Well, it started actually as a kind of surprise for myself because I was taking part in some conference in Rome, and I was called from Gießen, and I heard first time about Gießen then, that they want me to deliver a lecture, and I didn't have prepare any paper, but I had incidentally a paper on Gertrude Stein, and so I went there, and after the conference in Rome, and delivered this paper, and I thought that this is actually everything what can be done, and returned to America. And then half a year later, I got an invitation to be professor, but which was not so attractive for me if it would be not for the fact that coming from America, I could dictate my own conditions, which my German colleagues couldn't do. So, and I made the best use of it.
What were your conditions when you said, I'm going to come from America, I'm going to come in this very small town to an hour and a half north of Frankfurt, where what were your conditions? Say, I'm going to come and be part of that school. What were your ideas, your vision?
Yes, my conditions were also influenced by my experience of teaching in America, of course, and so different from the way that Theaterwissenschaft, the science of theater, as sounds pretentious in English, is being taught in Germany. And what was totally unusual, but not unusual for America, and in Germany now only to artistic school, that I taught the university that as a head of the institute, I will teach only 22 students during the year. The students will be of mine own choice, which is enormous work for the professor, which is on the elite school in America delegated to a dean of students. But this is, we have to do it. We like to do it, but it's enormous work to select our students. And the test we were giving was the test not of the knowledge, because the young undergraduates, but the tests we developed of sensitivity. And to my surprise, the university accepted it. It was the first time in the history of German university that such institute was created. And it was possible due to support of Americanists who also understood what is American model. So I had certainly support of Germans who are Americanists. And in a surprising way, it was possible. And the second thing was that was the first time in the history of German university that the theater for rehearsal was created. Actually, rebuilding, it's almost symbolic, rebuilding university auditorium into a black box.
Your idea also, which I guess made it radically different, was instead of hiring a faculty, artist teaching artist professor full-time, you said we should have the guest professor. What was the idea behind the guest professor?
Well, it was intention that I didn't have a special wisdom, but I had American experience, and I also knew the German scene, and I saw how different are the basic structure in the relationship between professor and student and so on. And it was also possible in Gießen because there were no dear colleagues there. There were no other Theaterwissenschaftler. It was never a theater department there. It was a university known for the studies in chemistry. Justus Liebig University, but not for humanities. And it happened out also that it helped, that they were not aware of what the kind of the problem.
And your idea was, instead of drawing of more European or German traditions, you said, the American avant-garde. Was that your guiding light in a way?
Yes, because I knew the German scene, and I know that this is what has to be done in order to break the insularity of Germany. Yes? And of course, I had a personal enthusiasm for that, because for the American artists, I was enthusiastic about, like Robert Wilson. And even before I became director of the school, I defended the work of Wilson in Germany. And of course, shortly after that, it became a major country inviting Wilson for his and accepting his very special conditions with theater production.
There were also, of course, German theater directors, Adolf Dresen, George Tabori, many traditional, in the sense of classical, great German directors. But let's come to Hans Werner and in your role as a student. Do you remember, I think you grew up in Bonn, you said, I'm going to study theater, you came to Gießen. Do you remember what that was, or how did that look like? How did it feel like?
Well, the first time when you enter in Gießen, you're in a city, you think, okay, where's the city? And the strategy Andrzej had when in the test we had to do, we saw a film of Beckett, Hey Joe, and we should describe Hey Joe. And so we did this, and then we were taken to the school. And then Andrzej had this strategy that he would confront us with things which we hadn't heard of. And we had this guest professors, and so everybody had his own style. So for us as a student to survive it, you have to, every semester, you're confronted with a different type of theater language. And of course, if you do that, and in the lectures Andrzej gave, it's a strategy of, it makes you nervous because you have a lot of different impacts. And I remember exactly when John came, for example, because John was using the students as actors. And he was treating language in a way which you would not experience before in Germany. And he was using I would say American storylines, and which were somehow familiar to us from the movies and other stuff. But in the way John was treating them was very different. It was very unique. It was his own approach. And so for us, it was it's like a roundabout. But what was good for us about it was that you have to pick very quickly how to make use of it for yourself, and it sharpens your image, your own version, your own attitude towards a theater, because otherwise you won't make it. And you see there is a lot of variety of styles, but if you want to do it, you have to have an issue. You have to have something which keeps you going. Otherwise you won't make it. And the good thing about this is that you figure out what is your way. And if there is every semester there is a moment where it looks like a dead-end street, you can make a turn. And so it's like moving in a labyrinth, and with the lights, somehow you try to orientate. So that's what I remember. I don't know.
Yeah, I think this Gießen school was structured that we all had to learn theater history. We had to, theater traditions from around the world. But we also had to go to English literature classes, Slavic and Eastern European literature classes, philosophy, law. We had to go to, I think, a sociology class. We had then also theater photography, lighting. We had to do some acting, some directing. We had Richard Schechner as a teacher, Heiner Müller, who came. So it always felt like foxes who knew a little bit of something, but nothing really deep. And at the time, we didn't know that it was an important school. We worked a little bit desperate. We just thought we had to work a lot, and there was nothing going on in that school. And
But I think somehow you could say when we came out of school, we were some kind of universal dilettante. But what was nice about it was that during the university, you figured out a way what was your interest. And then you would try to follow that. And Andrzej always said there is the kind of theater we train you for is not existing right now. So if you want to work on that, you have to create it on your own. And so some of us tried, and seems to work.
John, when you came to Gießen, I don't know how your experience with universities in American theater, because you also started as a sculptor and as a writer, but when you came to Gießen, how did that look like to you? How did that feel like to you?
Well, first of all, I should explain how I got to Gießen. So this also shows this continuity that's happened. Actually, Frank went to see an episode of Chang and Avoid Moon, my serial play, at a club. And I just think this is sort of, it's just a funny little thing, but somebody came to me in the club and it was packed with people and they're drinking and smoking and everything. And somebody says, there's some German kid who says he's a journalist trying to get a free ticket to get in. And so I look over there, there was a very young Frank Henscher there. And I said, well, just let him in, whatever. And so he saw the show and thought it was great and enjoyed it and said, would you be interested in maybe coming to, I go to this school in Gießen, and would you be interested in coming and doing a special project? You know, maybe we might be able to find a little money, the students can put some money together. And so I happened to be over there in England doing a different show of mine, and so I just came over and arrived in Gießen, and he was a little bit apologetic about it before when he was telling me about Gießen. I said, I've been to Gießen because I actually had spent 4 years as a teenager in Frankfurt, so I kind of knew that it wasn't, Gießen was not the center of the world. But it did become a real center later, I think. So that's how I arrived at this school where originally the students, I had my own little group, and I think I picked them.
Yeah.
They kind of auditioned. And the other thing was that I had just come from downtown. I hadn't never taught anything before. So I was actually coming to do a project with the students, and we were all hoping that we'd all learn something from it. And so I also have to say that it was really also an education for me. I really, absorbed a lot from that school, and also the relationship of all the students to Andrzej was, I thought, was great. It wasn't this kind of Papa theater master person. It was that they would get information from me, you would as well, but everybody would get information, they'd get advice, they'd get criticism, and then they would go back and try it again. But I thought it was interesting because the students were also a little bit older than college students in the United States. So they seemed a little more focused. And the other thing was that they were very, very, they knew a lot of things. So, which was really great. And I remember actually the first time I gave them a script, the next day for rehearsal, all of them had gone through the script, and they'd looked up every reference to anything, and then they questioned me as to, does this mean this or does this mean that? Or does this, or what does it mean? So they had already completely started making a dramaturgy of the text already, which I thought was great.
It was great. Yeah, and the young René Polish, who first time he acted in a play was in your play, and influenced his writing. We showed a piece of his work in the afternoon. He's now 3 or 4 times best dramatic writer in German-speaking countries. Enormous idea. But Andrzej, were you expecting this, what was happening? Was it a surprise? Were you...
No, it was not surprise, and we have to say it. I was also desperate how unattractive is the place called Gießen. But in order to be paid just to the situation, I have to say that it was Frankfurt, less than 1 hour with a car, in which
If you had a car.
Bill Forsyth.
Yeah.
Bill Forsyth, of course, who revolutionized dance in Germany and who was so American, like apple pie, yes? And his whole career was in Germany, and in Germany he restructured actually the traditional kind of dance being done in theater. And then it was everything, this neighborhood of this uninteresting and happily for us boring city, Gießen, that it was of course Wuppertal with Pina Bausch, yes, and also a little farther, but also reachable in Nuremberg was Cantor. I remember going with students by car for production of Tadeusz Kantor. And of course, then it was George Tabori, who was one of the first Gast professors. So it was the ambiente and the intellectual and artistic landscape, very interesting, dominating this anonymous place, Gießen. But you have to remember the context. Yes.
Of it. I remember one of the most influential things we did was a scenisches project or a project we did. It was Udo Marquardt. It was a philosophical essay. And maybe tell us a bit about it.
Okay.
What was your idea?
Yes, it was something to shock the colleagues at the University of Gießen. And it was, like in any old university, a house professor called Marquardt. And I thought that I should do something provocative to show that everything can be turned into theater. And I took an essay by Marquardt and staged it, a philosophical essay about the sense in philosophical terms. And it was done not on a stage, but it was done actually in the university hall with particular small roles for students. And it had the effect I wanted to have. It was a total shock among the colleagues, and it actually didn't please the philosopher Marquardt.
At all, yeah. Whereas collage of small scenes, students developed ideas. They were all collected like pearls on a string with Andrzej as the MC. And he insisted not to do it in this theater stage. He insisted to do it in the empty spaces, said use the spaces that are around you, see how big they are, and do something there. And because you will also not get in the big space, you have to do something on your own and take them as your own. Hans-Werner, I know that the work of Robert Wilson, early Robert Wilson, the way he developed his workshops was the way he still works now, which was not connected with any European theater. Did you take anything from the Gießen times in your work, where you say, I still connect this is the way I sing, this is the way I work, like in your craft of making theater?
It's difficult to say in 2 minutes because it's a kind of approach you have. And for example, it was interesting that you brought John to Gießen, but when we were working with Heine Müller, doing the Hamlet Machine in a version with this, I applied to work with Robert Wilson here in New York, and I came over and I stayed the first days with John, because John offered me a place to stay, and which was very generous. So
it was more than a few days.
No, but I think the point from the Gießen is what was the most important thing for us, because we were not classical actors or classical directors or classical dramaturgs. We were nothing classical at all. So if you want to do something, you would have to do it together with the people from the group, with the other students. And that's a very strong thing to do, because you have to find out what keeps you moving as a group, what you want to do, what you want to tell, and why you want to do it. And for example, in the kind of work I do, I think it's very much a group approach what I have. Because, for example, when I start with a project, I don't have a script and I don't think about actors. I have an interest in an issue, and I do long time research, and then I hand out research material to the people involved, to the musician, to the stage designer, to the actors, and then they pick what is interesting for them. And we do very complicated issues, but when you see a performance, it's the group's work. We call it not the experts of life, as Rimini Protocol says it. We are short-time experts for the issue. And so it's a group approach, but of course, I'm on the outside and I deliver the project idea. And then we try to share this, our experience with the issue, with the audience. So we don't develop a classical play in a classical structure. It's not a well-made play. It's something where you see people working on something. And for example, I always like it very much when Heine Müller said you have to deliver work to the audience. So that's what we do. We deliver a lot of work to the audience. So, and there is a lot of unemployment in Germany, and if you come to our performances, you can be sure that you will work. Otherwise, you get nothing out of it.
Yeah. Looking back, we'll go over and talk about your work, but looking back to Gießen, is there something you say, I wish I would have done more or differently, or is there something where you feel it could have gone further, or what you want you couldn't?
Well, that's a difficult question. But I think that now from the historical perspective, so to say, I see really what was novel in the school. One was a conviction that the schooling for theater in Germany was oriented toward skills which are defined very early, and young people were forced to make a decision that they will be designers or actors or critics. And I suspended this decision. I was convinced that these young people are too young to be forced into segmented professions in theater, actually understood as skills. And I wanted to train for the artistic, sounds pretentious, but artistic research. Artistic research. This was enormous difference. And of course, it didn't make other critics in Germany enthusiastic about the Gießener school, and I have to say quickly that it was considered very controversial, and an influential critic of Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung called it a Smith's shop of disaster, which was probably the kindest description this school got. So it had a very bad press. We had a very bad press. We were very controversial, very long. And we were also, we deserved our arrogance not to be interested in in German city, and state theater, which has actually a reproductive aesthetic to produce actors to serve the system, yes? While we refuse to accept it, and it sounds actually a very arrogant also for the students who were from the beginning told that we train you for the jobs which don't exist yet. We suspended the decision. Do you want to be director? Do you want to be designer? Yes. And this at that time was considered very controversial. And so it was not easy.
Yeah, you give more software for the brain.
Yeah.
And John, before we come to Hans Werner's work, afterwards, I know you have taught in Japan, in England, I think in Latin America. And looking back, is there like an aesthetic? Is there something you could, of a Gießen school? Is there something where you could say this is something that put your finger on? Say this is
actually, after I ended up teaching in all these different places, I always kind of use, at least the way I'm thinking, a model of Gießen, and I always kind of, some of my students are sick of maybe hearing about these German students, whatever, how they did everything. But, I have to say that it always has been kind of a model. It's kind of a very open model, but that uses a lot of scrutiny and questioning and argumentation and debate, investigation, all this kind of, all these things were happening there. All these students had been somehow educated into that, or the atmosphere helped create this kind of thing where you always knew that all those student heads were all thinking all the time about something. And sometimes people say, oh, well, they're German and they're thinking too much and all this kind of stuff. But but I always say, no, actually, no, it couldn't hurt you to think a little bit more. So that I've used as kind of a model. I always remember a long session, the translation sessions were always, to me, the most interesting ones, because they would all get a piece of the script and they'd all come back with their translation of it. And then for hours, they would debate the meaning of it, of the translation, the correct meaning, the possible meaning. So it went into all other areas of the world, just because they were translated, but they were so enthused about the information that they discovered, the ideas that they discovered. So that was always, it is kind of I always use it as a model, and I try to hold those students up to the Gießen model, really. Those students I had, which were all, they were all, as you were, handpicked and for a reason, and then set on a path, and then you guys had to carry. And actually, when you were talking about the controversy of the school, that was the other thing. I do remember the discourse, these festivals, where there would be huge arguments with students from the Ernst Busch School and people screaming at each other. And that educated the students a lot. I mean, they had to survive those arguments and they had to defend.
We created an international student festival where we would show each other's work, and then it became very deadly serious, sometimes a little bit too much, but I think then showing your own work and not never trying to get into a big theater, but take your own work as the most important. I think it was looking back quite lucky, that these things were there. But I would like to invite Kai to come over and talk about the work of Hans Werner, and he is a dramaturg. Actually a working dramaturg in a big theater, like all these people here. This is, this German theater does work differently. He has worked with Hans Werner, I think, in Würzburg, where was it? And is writing a dissertation on Hans Werner's work. He was a Siegel Center scholar. We host here 10 Siegel Center scholars with Marvin Carlson, who is here. In the Siegel Center, we have people from Japan, Brazil, China, Germany, Britain, Portugal, and from all around the world. So he was with us for a couple of months. And he will give a short introduction in the work of Hans Werner, who is one out of many, many artists that came out in the afternoon. We showed you some videos. but it will also give you an idea of something unique. And Hans Werner also has done something very special in the German theater. So we're going to come back. We both now go over.
Thank you.
And, thank you. So you maybe come over here.
Still warm, yes? All right. The privileges.
Yes, and maybe this is also kind of reconciliation, since I am an alumnus of the Ernst Busch School. No, we are talking with each other here. So, since I have worked several times with Hans Werner, I was asked to give an introduction to him and into his work. And maybe I will start to provide some biographic details. Hans Werner studied from 1983 until 1988 at the Institute for Applied Theatre Studies under André Wirth. And he started in 1987, you were a student still,
Right.
To work for Robert Wilson as an assistant director and dramaturg. And he held that position for 2 years. In these 2 years, this Hamlet machine was performed here in New York. And after Hans Werner left Robert Wilson, he started to join the production team of Heiner Müller. And since 1993, Hans Werner is developing and conducting this documentary theater for which he is really famous and unique in Germany. And in my little presentation, I want to think about what is this uniqueness about. And for doing this, I guess it's quite helpful to have a very brief look into the German history of documentary theater. And to keep it very short and very simple, you could say that there have been 3 periods of documentary theater in Germany. We got the 1920s with Erwin Piscator, connected to that name and the theater of that man, Erwin Piscator. Then we got the 1960s, connected to theater makers like Rolf Hochhuth, Heiner Kippert, Peter Weiss. And despite the very different subjects of these theater makers, of these different 2 periods, there's one thing that these 2 periods got in common. And I would guess that is their understanding of what a document is. Both periods are dealing with an understanding of document as something which gives an authentic expression of what has happened in the past. And thus these theater makers have worked a lot with published materials, for example, newspaper articles and so on. And actually this is the 3rd period of documentary and theater history, which came up with a completely new and more deconstructive idea of what a document is. This 3rd period started in the late 1990s, and of course it is going on until today. And so these theater makers are quitted to work with published materials and started to take part in this discourse of the human body as an archive. So within this context, you find Rimini Protocol, who are putting everyday people on the stage. Or you find a more sublime version of that if you take a look at Feridun Zaimoglu or Katrin Rögler, who are generating their texts by conducting face-to-face interviews with people. And if you like fancy terms, you can call this 3rd period the post-dramatic documentary theater. And I guess now that the uniqueness of Hans Werner's approach has to do with the fact that he is somehow going through all these periods. So like in the 20s and in the 60s, he is using only published material, and he's strictly refusing the participation of everyday people and everyday experiences in his works. But at the same time, he has this very critical attitude toward documents, which constitutes this 3rd period of documentary theater. And this was just now, from my side, a very theoretical, short overview of his work. And now we have prepared 3 little pieces out of his last staging. It is called Failed States #1. It's the beginning of a series. And the first failed state that Hans Werner has worked on was Somalia. Maybe before we show the first piece, very little piece, you tell us something about that production.
Well, it's actually it's a very simple production because it's what we do. You find a lot of elements we use when we work with our issues. The first time I ran into Somalia was when we did a play about the genocide in Rwanda, and the American government refused to interfere because there was a Black Hawk Down issue in Somalia, when Clinton changed the whole foreign policy for Africa after that. And in Germany, Somalia plays a very important part. I'm sure you're familiar with Baader-Meinhof groups, the German terrorism in the 70s. And there was an airplane taken with hostages to Mogadishu in Somalia. And coming back now to this issue of the failed state, there the German state proved that it was a strong state, because the German state sent in a special police troop, and they rescued the 86 people inside the airplane and shot the 4 terrorists. And so it was international acclaim of Germany. This was a very high standard. And that's something which is, because I grew up in Bonn, so it's something which is very familiar to you, dealing with the German terrorist movement, because it changed the whole atmosphere in the country in the 77. If you have the chance to see this film, German in Autumn, you should definitely go and rent this and see this. You get a very good impression of the state of mind the country was in. And so we developed a play where we started with, because we always try, when we work, we try to start with something, how it is related to Germany, to our experience. So we developed a play where we start with this, the untold story of Somalia, because the German government, they paid 75 million Deutschmarks developing money, and they paid 25 million in cash. Because Somalia was at a state of war at this time, and they wanted to have weapons from Germany, because the German weapons, they work, you know that. And but the German chancellor said there's no chance to deliver weapons directly. But if he gives you 25 million in cash, Egypt has Russian weapons, and you can buy them from Egypt, maybe. And that's what they did. So, and then these weapons become a kind of issue in supporting the leader of Somalia, Siad Barre. So, and then the country disappears from the frame, and it comes back when the Americans interfere with the Black Hawk Down story, which they did because they didn't want to interfere in the war in the former Yugoslavia. And then, after this, the country disappears again, and then it comes back when there are the pirates, because the international trade is going over water. And now all these nations unite and do something against the pirates in Somalia. So we developed a play which has 3 different sets. We start in a theater with the whole audience. You see something from the 70s. Then we split the audience in 3 different groups, and you get informations about Somalia, but with different perspective, from an economical point of view, from a tourist point of view, from a political point of view. And then we bring the audience together and we put them on the stage. And there you go into the journey of the Black Hawk Down. And we use, for telling the story of the Black Hawk Down, we use material from the German military school, from the government, which did an analysis of the stuff which went wrong. And then you're on the stage. And so you make a journey through the whole theater in different sets. We use the audience. And then we open up the Iron Curtain, and you sit at the back of the theater. If this is the end of the stage, the whole theater opens up, and suddenly we perform the whole stage. And the whole stage, with the audience spaced together, you experience the story of the pirates. And because there was, for the first time last year, since 400 years, there was a trial against Somali pirates, against pirates in Germany, in Hamburg. And so that's the journey So you see, we try to take the people on a journey. And if you go with us and if you work with us, it's fine. If you don't go, maybe it's not an interesting evening. So maybe we show you the first clip, how it all starts. Oh, that's the second clip, I think. Maybe we go a little bit back. Here we go. Here we go.
Oktober 1977. Erinnern Sie sich? Am 13. Oktober 1977 entführt das palästinensische Kommando Amartya Halil die Lufthansa-Maschine Landshut mit 86 Passagieren und 5 Besatzungsmitgliedern auf dem Rückflug von Palma de Mallorca. In einem Schreiben erklärt die RAF, das Kommando Amartya Halil sei identisch mit dem Kommando.
Tells the story of the kidnapping.
Yeah. But the thing, why, just to give you an explanation, you have this song which you hear, we were listening to, Mendocino. Mendocino was a very popular song from the 70s, Michael Holm, it was in the hit parade. But the other thing with Mendocino was that the code name for the taking Schleyer, Hans-Martin Schleyer hostage, which was the beginning of the German autumn, inside the Red Army faction was Mendocino. So if you know this background, you get more out of it when you hear the song. If you don't, then it's just well, a funny little song. And the actor starts with saying 13th of October 1977. Do you remember? Do you? And of course, that's for me, it's a quotation. There is this very famous thing with Heine Müller where he has, do you remember? Do you know? I don't. That's what we're dealing with. Do we remember? How we remember? And what use we make of that, what we remember. Because history, from my point of view, it's always dealing with the leftovers of history. And the problem, what a lot of people think in this kind of theater, the documentary theater, what is the label, the trademark of it, is that it's objective. It's not. It's definitely not objective. Because whenever you do the research, you have a whole bunch of material, and every decision you take for one document is a decision against 99 others. So it's the standpoint of the group which is working on this. Just to give you an idea.
Maybe you can elaborate a bit more on the way you are working. So this group process you talk about.
For example, the way we work, it's quite simple. The actors, they have to love reading because they get a lot of material. Before we start with the actual rehearsal process, we send out the material. It's a big bunch of paper, and then the actors work their way through the paper. And then they pick what is interesting. So I don't do the research alone. I do it together with my dramaturg, Regina, and she develops the different files, and then the actors pick what is interesting for them. And of course, we have more material. Then you can give in more material, and then we try to develop the performance script. How do we do it? And the only rule we have. A lot of these texts are not written for the stage. It's not classical, how you say, it's not a classical dialogue. So, and we don't change it. So when the actors perform it on the stage, it will be strange. It will be an alien to the performer, to the audience. And they have to put in work to make fun of it, to work with it. So you see, there is a very German concept of work, I realize, in this stuff. But I think the pleasure of this is that the group is responsible for the stuff they say. For example, sometimes I'm invited by state theaters when I don't work with my own company, and then you have the actors and you send them the material, but they think that's a dramaturgical material, and some of them, they don't look at it. Because they have time in the rehearsal to look at it when they're not on stage. And then when you start, you discuss with them, and then if you then work with you, it doesn't work all the time. I had a very interesting experience in one theater where an actress suddenly said to me, well, Hans, if I pick the text, if I pick the stuff, this means I'm responsible for saying it on the stage. And I was very surprised. And I said, well, but isn't this always a situation when you say something on stage? And then she said very clearly, no, because there is a playwright, there is a director, and there is a dramaturg. And then I'm responsible. And so we got into a very interesting discussion, what we do when we go on stage, when we do something. Maybe that's to give you an impression how it works, if it works.
So maybe we show the next piece?
If we still have time, we show that. Yeah, we show.
Maybe
because
we show.
I just tell you what it is, because what you see here is it's a material. There was a meeting between the German Bundeskanzler Helmut Schmidt, who is the only person still allowed to smoke in every space where he is in Germany right now. He is our old Bundeskanzler, and you can't stop him from smoking. And with all the old pictures, you see him with a cigarette. And there was a meeting with him and the ambassador from Somalia in Germany, where they were talking about the way how Germany could help Somalia. And of course, that's not a dialogue. It's just a transcript from the meeting. And we use it as material for staging. Maybe we can just show you now how it works.
Der Bundeskanzler weist auf die Notwendigkeit hin,
dass beide Regierungen erörtern,
ob und wie die Bundesregierung Somalia jetzt und in Zukunft hilfreich sein können.
Er soll unterrichtet über das von der Bundesregierung vorgesehene und Somalia akzeptierte Soforthilfeprogramm, eine wirtschaftliche Hilfe von 76 Millionen D-Mark zu geben.
Hiervon wird etwa ein Drittel, das sind 25 Millionen D-Mark, waren die
Dies geben Somalia den Möglichkeit, Freiheit zu kaufen, was sie aus ihrer eigenen Sicht vorbringen.
Von ca. 6 Millionen D-Mark Barmitteln der technischen Hilfe,
Ankauf von 30 10 Tonnen LKW der Marke Daimler-Benz
sowie Traktoren bzw. Planierraupen
und Einbindung im laufenden somalen Ansiedlungsprogramm.
Das Bundesministerium für wirtschaftliche Zusammenarbeit hat inzwischen nach Abstimmung mit dem Auswärtigen Amt den Ansatz der Kredithilfe-Rahmenplanung von bisher 12 Millionen D-Mark auf 25 Millionen D-Mark festgelegt.
Botschafter Bukar antwortet, Präsident Siad Barre ersuche um politisch-diplomatische Unterstützung,
Waffenhilfe und eine Sicherheitsgarantie gegen einen äthiopischen Angriff.
Er begründet die Bitte damit, dass die sowjetische Einmischung mit dem Ziel einer Herrschaft über das Horn von Afrika...
There is a contact mic on the table which that you register the sound.
Es bleibt bei unserer Linie keine direkte oder indirekte Finanzhilfe für Waffenkäufe, nur Kredithilfe und technische Hilfe, aber großzügige Warenhilfe. Der Bundeskanzler gibt zu verstehen, die Bundesregierung könne finanzielle Unterstützung geben,
die auch für Verteidigungszwecke verwendet werden könne.
Eine solche Vereinbarung müsse aber streng vertraulich bleiben.
Der Bundeskanzler geht davon aus, dass dies auch im somalischen Interesse liege.
Der Botschafter Bukar stimmt zu.
Seine Regierung wolle nicht nur eine Form der Unterstützung für ihre Zusammenarbeit mit der Bundesregierung bei der Befreiung der Geiseln und Überfischung belohnt werden, aber...
Okay, so you get an impression how it works. It's like a ballet with cigarettes. And what the stuff they're talking about, it's incredible. Because in all these informations you got about the German autumn, because of course there was media celebration, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, but you didn't find the information actually what was the deal between the German government and the Somalian government. And I found that interesting. Theater is a very good medium to deliver informations you might not expect in a theatrical framework. And when you read the text, you think it's, well, how can you do this on stage? You can. The actors always change their, how you say, the angle, the perspective. So just to give you an impression how it works.
Okay, then due to the time, I guess we cut it here.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
We continue.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, we know each other.
Yes. I think it's easier to be this way. Okay, let's have some of my notes. Hello. Okay. I'm just putting my notes on the table here, so I don't have to shuffle through them, so I can. Okay. Andrzej, welcome back to New York. I know you've been coming for many decades and how much you love the city. And I often visit Andrzej also in Berlin and sometimes in travels through Europe. So we've had discussions for many decades on various topics about American theater and about Europe and everything. I like very much in the documentary that you turned around the Latin phrase and to make it say, life is long and art is brief. The CUNY is the place, though it was not this building, it was originally on 42nd Street. CUNY is the place where we first met, since I was a student in Andrzej's class on German theater around the almost before the mid-70s. And America, New York in particular, is the place where you also were educated in American theater. I could say in a sense that I was in European theater in your class, among others here at CUNY. So what were the most important concepts that you brought from New York when you moved back to Europe? The most important concepts about theater that you took with you?
Well, it was a sense of very difficult to explain in a European context where theater is over-coded in a certain way. It means that is oriented toward keeping alive this very sophisticated and actually admired outside of Germany machinery of a 200 state and city supported theater. And there is a feeling that on the German side you have a sense of continuity, a sense of working for one classical repertoire, which is served permanently in different renderings. And you have a situation which we don't have in the States, that the audience is familiar not only with their actors, which is also in a banal way visible in theater programs, that German theater programs that don't say anything about actors in playing in a given theater because they assume that the audience knows. Yes? And of course it is a right assumption because the audience not only knows their actors, but being a subscribed audience, they know exactly who is sitting on the left and on the right side. And actually I was still fascinated with and commented loud about that this is a classical conflict situation in Germany where the theaters have through-going rows. There are no aisles. So you are in a certain way like in a plane. You cannot leave theater. And this was in drastic way visible as Robert Wilson at the Schaubühne said, intermission to our discretion. It is impossible in theater where the seats do have 60 or 40 seats, and they are numbered different. They are numbered from both sides. So that in the center of the house, there are usually two seats, number 50. And then if you join German theater, the classical conflict situation appears. Sie haben hier nie gesessen. This is my seat. And there are two people who overlooked that indeed they have 15, but with a small letter left, links, or rechts. So typical classical situation, but this probably what I also learned from Marvin. The architecture of theater influenced the customs of the audience. And this is a very particular German situation where American sense of freedom, intermission to our discretion is not possible to act out.
Mm-hmm. And also by the time you moved back to Germany, you had been so much in the downtown spaces and so many other kinds of spaces. So did your theater going here, in a sense, affect your thinking and writing also? Because you also returned to Germany and were continuing to write criticism. I'm trying to pinpoint the kinds of things you learned about American theater. You brought a lot of German theater and European theater thinking here when you were teaching here or writing in other publications abroad even. But were there particular, concepts, styles, techniques, approaches that you found fundamental for your own thinking when you were in America? That have always remained a kind of like basic principles or fundamentals?
Well, but you remember in my teaching was first, I'm in debt to Brecht, of course, and I was a student and assistant in Brecht ensemble immediately after Brecht's death. So Brecht was not around, but I experienced from inside as assistant what is the work of Berliner Ensemble. That was one thing. And here in America, I started with this concept theater without an audience, which was Brechtian concept, because Brecht's principal idea of a Lehrstück, of a didactic play, was that it does not have the audience, that this is actually for the training of participants, a very radical concept, which I like very much. And this, in a certain way, seduced my thinking to talk about theater without the audience, which was, of course, the point of biting jokes of my colleagues, that the theater of Andrzej Wirth is theater without an audience. And he deserves that.
Speaking of Brecht, I remember going to Lehman College and seeing your own production of The Measures Taken that you worked on with students there, right?
That's right. Well, this actually was a maverick that it could happen, because it was actually a first American premiere of a play which Brecht himself didn't permit to be produced because of the analogy with, not only analogy, but it was interpreted by many people as glorification of a Stalin terroristic trials. And I was very lucky because I knew Stefan Brecht, the son of Bertolt Brecht, who lived here in the town, and he gave me permission, totally unexpected, to play it in English. And then I had this idea to do it with dancers. That's what you saw maybe in the first part. A little deformed because it was on the old type of film, and it was digitalized later, and there is a deformation. But I had this idea after the tradition of seeing the work of communists in Russia, the conspiratory work as clandestine and not aesthetically attractive, to have young female dancers being communist agitators. And of course now seeing it after almost after 30 years, yes, and more than 40 years, I have to think, well, these ladies are grandmothers, yeah. And it's a special joy to see it now. And Paweł Kotzambasi, the film he made, shows this.
I remember seeing the measures taken in Berlin shortly after the wall fell, or maybe even after the unification period, at the Berliner Ensemble. I think Engel directed it, the son of Engel, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, but I thought it uninteresting.
Well, the thing that interested me about it was that it seemed to have been influenced by this time by the Wooster Group style of performing, and that the actors were all in front of microphones and had joined the rhetorical style of the Wooster Group with the speaking style of German acting. Since we're talking about the measures taken, what do you think of that play now in terms of the setting of today?
Well, it's interesting as language. It's a problem how hard it can be rendered in translation. And I was forced to use Bentley's translation, which I don't consider good, proper, or adequate, and whether in a certain way I was not allowed to change it, but I did change it. But of course, these were all these small corrections, so we couldn't change everything. But I still consider it, if read in original, a masterpiece.
Are there contemporary German productions occasionally nowadays of this play?
Oh, no.
Not at all. Let me ask you something else. Besides Brecht being one of your touchstones, it mentioned very frequently in the film about Bob Wilson. And I know you began to see his work early in the 70s, maybe around 73 or so, when The Life and Times of Joseph Stalin was at Brooklyn Academy of Music. I know that was the first time I saw it, his work. So what are the qualities of Wilson that, looking back now after all these decades and following his production so much and knowing the German situation, what do you see now as Bob Wilson's ultimate achievements in theater, in your mind?
Yes, this is a double question you asked me. One is that it went through different phases. The reception of Robert Wilson in Germany, starting with a big hostility, ridicule, important local critics just making fun of Wilson. And I was lucky that I could play a role of defender of Wilson aesthetics. And this was on the basis of Death Destruction in Detroit, which was in a production of the Schaubühne, a very brilliant, I think one of the probably the best productions of Wilson. And being in Germany, he also got a quality of acting and no problems with money, and long rehearsals and so on and so on. But the critical reception was very, very ironic and actually stupid in many sense. And I was the only one defender, and it's interesting. I wrote a long essay in Theater Heute defending Wilson and trying to show in a German context what you have to say, what is novel in Wilson. But this essay was printed in Theater Heute in an unprecedented way, that they printed what I wrote about that, and then a response of another critic who thought that Wilson is plagiarist. This is, I don't know from whom.
Plagiarist?
Plagiarist. Ausgerechnet, yes. But it helped me very much in my later friendship with my admiration Wilson, friendship with Wilson. But Wilson, who is a very loyal friend, never has forgotten that I was in this situation, that I was also covered under artillery of the critical establishment in Germany to promote Wilson. And of course, it took a time, and it's very interesting that after this scandalous, ungraceful beginning, Germany became, as you know, the only one country in this scale which is capable of fulfill Wilson's special conditions concerning length of the rehearsals, equipment. It produces now, after these arrogant beginnings, some exceptional situation for Wilson, for instance, in Berliner Ensemble, the former Brecht Theater, which became a house of Robert Wilson. And if Wilson is doing a new play, a German play, in Berliner Ensemble, then the normal praxis of a repertory theater, which Berliner Ensemble is stopped, so to say, only to accommodate Wilson, who needs 3 times longer time for rehearsals than a conventional place. And another, of course, paradox is that Wilson, not knowing German, started to work on the German classics. For instance, the small canon of Büchner, the whole canon with Dantos Des and Wojciech and Leoncha and Lena. I don't see a German director who did this small canon about all Büchner. That is Robert Wilson now. So Robert Büchner, who is more German than the other writer, he is now eaten in the sauce of Wilson.
Isn't it interesting also that Wilson has always had so much trouble working here with more traditional American actors, but yet the German actors can be in Schiller one day and Wilson in another and Shakespeare in another. How is it, because of their training, that he gets such magnificent performances out of them?
Oh, well, there are anecdotes, theater anecdotes about that. Peter Stein invited, this was the beginning I was talking about, Wilson to the Schaubühne, and he did, as I said, Destruction in Detroit. And Stein was very political. Suddenly became afraid of Wilson, thinking that Wilson is here under the cover, sending some messages which don't rhyme with the mission of a great leftist Schaubühne. Particularly, the focus on Hess, of Rudolf Hess, was understood after the production by Stein as a kind of ideological intrusion. So Stein regretted that he invited Wilson, but then happened as afterwards something awful for Peter Stein as an intendant of the Schaubühne, that his actors got the infection from Wilson, and Edith Clever, a big tragical actress of the Schaubühne, and I researched this with my students after many years from the internal recordings of the internal conversation in theater. Edith Clever addressed Stein and said, "You, Peter Stein, you never told me that what this American told me." And I was like, "What he told you?" He came to me and said, "Edith, you are a star." And of course, Stein was a very German, very authoritative actor who never said some niceties to actors.
Well, Edith Clever is an interesting case too, because she was such a great figure in the Sieberberg films as well, and in some of Peter Stein's work. I saw it early on, the trilogy Des Wiedersehen, for example, really great production. One of the first I had seen in Germany. But it has, you know, it's always remarkable to see even old actors in their 70s and 80s the performances that he gets out of them. I'm thinking of Threepenny Opera or Shakespeare Sonnets, things that, you know, were recently in the Berlin Ensemble. I hope Shakespeare Sonnets gets here. It hasn't been here. It's not been in New York seen, but he does get these extraordinary performances, and I'm still not certain that he would get them out of American actors, even after all these decades, or whether they would be open to this kind of work. Wilson's always had a problem working in the American theater. We've been...
One more question. We slowly maybe have some audience questions.
Okay, but can I just ask Algie one more to speak about Polish theater, because and then I'll turn it over to the audience. I know that you always have said that for such a small country, Poland has given so much to world theater. I'm thinking of our conversation with Witkiewicz and Gombrowicz and Grotowski and Kantor. And sometimes we attend festivals together, as we did last May in Torun, where in Poland, where one sees a lot of Polish theater. And I've always been intrigued how you always say you want to go to the theater to see the status or to see the current condition of the Polish language, and how you think so much of going to the theater because of how it expresses the language of a country. I wonder if you might speak a little bit about that, the language of theater, but also a kind of summing up of how you look at Polish theater at the beginning of the 21st century. I mean, in terms of the overview or the gifts that Polish theater, looking back now, have given to world theater.
This is a difficult question, but first of all, there is some permanent amazement, but this is, I know, nothing particular, that each language changes, and if you live longer, you see these changes which other people don't see. And now I was a Polish writer. I left Poland as I was 40. I published, I translated, and so on. And now I see the language, how the language changed. But talking to American friends, they also report to me how American language changed. The first thing that the simple question of statement, for instance, we have a lovely weather. In my time, was rendered in this way, totally flat. We have a lovely weather. Now the same sentence is, we have a lovely weather. Let's go up. And I hear from American friends that the same happened in American lingua. That suddenly the short sentences of statement do sound like a question. It goes up. So.
And can you hear this in the theater? Is it changing theater language as well?
Yes.
That's interesting. So that's extremely interesting.
Yes, I used to say, because I'm going to Poland only if I'm invited, and I'm saying yes, I'm going to Polish theater only to be angry with the language.
Well, should we stop here a second and see if there are any questions from the audience?
Yeah, maybe some light to the audience for us, so you can hear us.
Oh, good.
Maybe one question would be the influence of Hans Thies Lehmann, who developed his ideas, prompted also by you on post-dramatic theater.
Well, we have a friendly disagreement with Lehmann. Hans Thies Lehmann, who is now very famous because of the concept of post-dramatic theater, I used to argue with him that post-dramatic was already articulated by Brecht. The theater of Brecht, the epical theater, das epische Theater, was already anti-dramatic. And it was the earliest and the most lucid definition of post-dramatic theater, yes, as being epical. And we had a permanent friendly, as I said, disagreement, because my approach was to focus on the dialogue, what happened with the dialogue, actually, after what is now covered with the term post-dramatic. So my argument was that I wonder why this post-dramatic made such a career. And indeed, this is not an envy about the colleague who invented something which caught sympathy of actors, because this is really loved very much in the restaurant of the theater to say I am post-dramatic. Yeah, I am post-dramatic. So my main argument in this friendly disagreement is that who now uses post-dramatic as instrumental term misses the point in a certain way, because the focus should be on already further, on the dialogue. What happened with the dialogue? That is no more conversation. Then you can analyze it more precise. And otherwise, if you say today post-dramatic, it is a balloon. It is you are stretching the term in the view of of a theater, of a historical theater theory, and you are ignoring actually the contribution and the diagnostic look of Brecht.
I think you always used to start the point from the street scene by saying that already with the street scene there was no dialogue.
Yes, of course. Yeah, exactly.
It was just narrative.
So we're recording it, so not only we can hear you better, but it's also being recorded.
Okay, I had a question. If you could talk a little bit about your experience working with the administration of the university in Gießen, because there is always a tension between art school and the university. They have different logics. And so I'm wondering how you, in a way, negotiated those two logics to protect the school and keep the work going.
Oh, thank you for this question, because I have even a very ironic anecdote about that. How at that point, the central, of course, we are talking about 83, yes, how much insular was Germany. As I was invited to be head of the institute in Germany, the university promised to pay for the transfer of my books, of my furniture, and transport of my family, and so on. So it went by ship, and after this was done, I sent the bills to the university, and then I'm getting a letter from the chancellor of the university, dear Professor Wirth, the bills which you sent us refer to the time in which your call to be professor in Germany was not yet in discussion. How it was possible, I thought. It was so possible that they didn't know that Americans write the dates in a reverse way. You know, they didn't know even. The chancellor of the university wrote me a letter that I sent him, actually invented bills. So this is, I think, a very vivid answer to your question. But of course, it would be unfair to say, because on the other hand, I had the support of Americanists, because the Americanists recognize that what I am trying to establish is also determined through my experience of theater on the campus. And this what still attracted me in America so much.
Maybe one or two more questions?
Just in looking at the pieces of theater that we saw this afternoon that were presented as examples of the Gießen School, I was wondering if you would be able to track a timeline or make a judgment about the arc of the Gießen School that's become less political over time. And I would look at René Polish as being sort of the older example, who's extremely politically engaged and articulate about economic and political issues. Moving on to Rimini Protocol, and then sort of onto Gob Squad, which seems to be considerably less political to me. Would you agree with that sort of trend?
Yes. Okay, thank you for this question. It's a good question, because 30 years is a very long period, of course. And from being controversial, this school, which was a surprise for us, became canonic in a certain way. And the very sharp opposition to the established German repertory theater is now, if you want, transformed through the fact that now these leading German dramatists, such as René Polish, Moritz Rinke, that they are also performed in state and city theaters. So this initial opposition this is a controversial school working on a margin in the front of a big edifice of a German state and unique state and city theaters, is now neutralized. So also, as I said, a lot of electives of this once controversial school work now in the almost classics of the example René Polish, who got his own theater, the Volksbühne, where he produced only his own plays, and who is now invited to all canonic German repertory theaters, such as Kammerspiele in Munich or the Hamburg Theater, and performed on the big festivals. So this changed. It is no wonder 30 years.
And Gob Squad also has now an English component. I think it's made up of German and English theater artists.
Maybe one last question, would you have?
No, I'll wait. Thank you. Please let him. My question has to do with the period when you went back to Germany, and that was in the 1980s. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually in '83. Yeah.
Yes. And here, so many of the young people that were in performing arts, not necessarily theater specifically, but performing arts and dance specifically, could not necessarily get jobs here and went to Germany. I remember there were so many young people that were graduating in dance and went to Germany. And then they were supported in the cities. They were in the opera companies in the cities. And of course, this isn't theater necessarily, but I'm curious about the support you got to have this department, just to create this department. I don't, what were the economics of that situation?
Well, this is actually now a growing situation with American disillusioned of artists, mostly performance, who descended on Berlin. Partially it was economical, because many young performers from New York found a living here too expensive, and in Berlin they get spaces in which they can work. But this is still a growing trend. A lot of young performers who already had a name in this country landed now in Berlin. Also writers who just work, not even mixing with the German language, but doing the writing in English, who are not now in Berlin. So Berlin is now an enormous colony of not only American artists, but particularly young people. But we have also another phenomenon that young performers, internationally connected and not interested or disillusioned so much that they know that with the artistic profession they cannot make any money, so they are jobbing, and parallel to that they're making serious work. And the typical model of a young disillusioned American performance artist in Berlin is that the young ladies work waiting tables, yes, but at the same time doing very interesting artistic work. I have enormous respect for this kind of determination. And we have in Berlin now a fascinating international performance performance scene. And amazingly how these young people, disillusioned, not the disillusion, but knowing that they cannot make money with this, are internationally connected. And they're inviting themselves to Berlin. And this also, not only performers, but also painters, for instance. And they just want to have in their credentials, I had an exhibition in Berlin, although they didn't sell one picture even, yes? But it's an enormous industry, and it's amazing how it works, how they are interconnected.
So I would say thank you to Bonnie and Andre.